Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. HTM here with another PTS patch note video for you guys. Today we're talking about sets, specifically new item sets from the Ascending Tide DLC. We'll also be taking a look at some new PvP sets from Rewards for the Worthy, as well as Imperial City, plus some base game set changes, some buffs, some nerfs too, I would say. Quite a lot of changes here in terms of game sets, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. Starting first with the new DLC sets, there's going to be 4 of those per dungeon. So 1 light, 1 medium, 1 heavy, and 1 monster set. Those dungeons, in case you're interested, they're called Coral Airy and Shipwright's Regret. Coral Airy is going to be in Northern Somerset. Shipwright's Regret is located in Eastern Rivenspire. And let's go ahead and jump into these sets here, starting with Coral Airy. So the light armor set is called Maligalig's Maelstrom, and this has max magicka, 4% healing done, weapon and spell damage, and for the 5-piece bonus here, on overhealing yourself or a group member with a direct heal, you're going to apply the Maligalig's Maelstrom. I think I'm saying that right. Maligalig's Maelstrom to the target for 6 seconds. That deals shock damage to enemies within 7 meters. And the damage is based on the overhealed amount. 33% of the overhealed amount up to 3,300. This effect can occur once every 10 seconds. So the wording is a little bit confusing. Basically, this is like a healer set that procs damage, which is kind of interesting. It seems to put like this shock pulse on another player in your group if you overheal them, and the amount of damage that's done by that shock is based on how much you overheal them, up to 3,300. Now, the tooltip isn't clear, but I'm guessing that's 3,300 damage per second for 6 seconds, because otherwise it's going to be very, very low damage. So we'll definitely have to try that one out. It's pretty interesting. Griffin's Reprisal is the medium set. You get crit chance, offensive penetration, crit chance again. And when you deal critical damage, you can activate Griffin's Reprisal on the enemy for 8 seconds, causing a small griffin to fly by and deal bleed damage over 10 seconds to enemies within 5 meters. Wow. Can't wait to see this one in action. The synergy can be applied every 20 seconds and scales off the higher of your weapon or spell damage. Okay, so this sounds pretty interesting. What's interesting is that it's a synergy that you can use yourself or another player can use, and it's going to apply AoE bleed damage over 10 seconds. That could be potentially pretty strong. Let's take a look at the heavy set here. Glacial Guardian gives us armor, max stamina, health recovery, and after successfully blocking from an enemy within 8 meters, tethered to them for 8 seconds. While tethered, you deal frost damage every second to enemies touching the tether, causing them to have a 200% increased status effect chance. Wow. The tether breaks if the target moves, and damage scales off your max health. So this is really interesting. This is kind of a unique debuff, it seems like. It increases their status effect chance by 200%. This is pretty cool for tank builds, for support builds. I also like how it's a frost-themed set. Yeah, I like that one a lot. All right, and then the monster mask here from this dungeon, Cargata? Not sure if I'm saying that right. So you get max magicka and max stamina, which seem to be lower values, which is interesting. Usually those are a little bit higher. And then for the 2-piece on dealing damage with a heavy attack, create a whirlwind that slowly moves forward 8 seconds, growing by 3 meters every 3 seconds. This sounds kind of like a hurricane from Stamina Sorcerer. Enemies within the whirlwind take shock damage and physical damage every second, and allies reduce their magicka and stamina cost by 10%. And it can occur once every 20 seconds. So a bit of a long cooldown on that. It's up for 8 seconds and then down for another 12. But it's interesting that it does damage and it also reduces magicka and stamina cost for allies. That's a pretty cool support set as well. Okay, let's go to the next dungeon, which is Shipwright's Regret. The light set is called Stormed Cursed Revenge. I definitely like this one. This gives you max magicka, weapon and spell damage, offensive penetration. And when you deal shock damage, you have a 15% chance to deal some additional shock damage to the enemy and up to 2 other enemies within 5 meters. And it scales off your weapon and spell damage. So I'm not sure if they just missed it in the patch note. I don't see like a baseline damage number, which is interesting. So based on these patch notes, we have no idea how much damage this is going to cause. But the one thing that you need to notice about this, there's no cooldown on this damage. So if you are applying a lot of shock effects, whether you're like a mag sork or something, maybe you have liquid lightning on your back bar, maybe you have wall of elements with a lightning staff, this could potentially even proc off lightning staff heavy attacks, because those are shock damage as well, I believe. So you have multiple chances to proc this with no cooldown. So yeah, I really want to play around with this and do like a Shock Lord kind of build, where you do as much sources of shock damage as possible and then try to proc this as much as you can. It does have a 15% chance, which is kind of low. But like I said, that's going to proc off any lightning damage and there's no cooldown. That could be pretty strong. Spriggan's Vigor is the medium set, so we get critical chance, max stamina, weapon and spell damage. And when you deal critical damage, you gain a stack of Wild Growth for 5 seconds and restore 100 stamina for 10 stacks max. Each stack also increases your maximum stamina by 222. Okay. So you get 100 stamina per stack back. So it's like recovery. And then once it's fully stacked, you'll get about 2,220 max stamina. I don't know. This one doesn't seem that great to me. Maybe if it had a little bit more stamina, it would be good. I don't know. Not too sure about that one. Let's keep going. Turning Tide is the heavy armor set. Max health, max stamina, max health. After successfully blocking, you gain flowing water for 10 seconds, causing your next bash attack to deal magic damage up to 6 enemies in a 10-meter line and, oh man, look at this, and apply major vulnerability for 10 seconds, increasing their damage taken by 10%. This effect can occur once every 15 seconds and scales off your max health. So that's a pretty unique buff. That's basically kind of the Necromancer's thing, applying major vulnerability. Now, any class can apply that using this Turning Tide set with a bash attack. That's pretty interesting. And then finally, the Monster Mask Nazare, max health. And then when you use an ultimate ability, the closest 6 enemies within 12 meters have all their damage over time. Major debuffs and minor debuffs applied to them extended by 1 second per 25 ultimate cast. Doesn't affect damage beams or damage tethers, and it can occur once every 20 seconds per target. Okay, this is really unique. This is a unique idea for a set. Extending your debuffs and dots by 1 second per 25 ultimate. So if you spent 250 ultimate, you would have an extra 10 seconds. If you spent all of your ultimate possible, which would be 500 ultimate, you'd get 20 extra seconds on your dots and your effects. This could be kind of cool on, I think, a Dragonite build, which already has some long-lasting dots. You can get that other set, the heavy armor set. I can't remember the name of it right now, but that extends your fire damage effects by, I think, another 10 seconds. So you could have, what, maybe a 40-second dot? Or more, 45 seconds. I have to play around with this, especially on the Dragonite, and see how long we can get our dots to go. That'd be kind of fun, I think. So that's the new sets. Let's jump down to PvP sourced sets now. So there's going to be some from Rewards for the Worthy as well as Imperial City. Starting with the rewards sets, we've got Rallying Cry. This is a light armor set. Critical chance, max magicka, crit chance again. And while Battle Spirit is active, critically healing yourself or an ally causes you and up to 11 other group members within 12 meters to gain 300 weapon and spell damage and 1650 critical resistance. Also, this is an interesting part. Each group member affected reduces the weapon and spell damage by 15 and the critical resistance by 83. So basically, the larger your group is, the less effective this buff becomes for them. That's pretty cool how they did that. I actually like that. Hue and Sunder is a medium armor set. This gives you max stamina again, weapon and spell damage, and when you deal damage with a heavy attack, you gain offensive penetration for each enemy within 8 meters of you. Sorry, within 8 meters of the target for 10 seconds. This effect can occur once every 7 seconds. So does this overlap? Can you get multiple versions of this? The timing is strange, but also I don't see any target cap on this. Maybe it's implied. What do you guys think about this? This is actually a lot of penetration. You know, if you get enough enemies, if you have like 4 or 5 enemies in front of you, this becomes one of the best penetration sets in the game. That's really good for PvP builds. Can imagine this with like Cleave or something, with something like the Master's Two-Hander with the new reverse slash morph that deals more damage this patch. Yeah, that's going to be pretty nice. Okay, heavy armor set, enervating aura. Enervating aura, how do you say that? Enervating? Anyways, it's a heavy armor set. It gives you healing taken, max health armor. And when you deal direct damage, you have a 10% chance to create an area under the target that detonates after 1 second, applying the aura for 10 seconds. This lowers the health recovery, magical recovery, and stamina recovery of enemy players by 129 per hit. This effect can occur once every 15 seconds. See, weren't they trying to get rid of like these proc chance calculations? It seems like a lot of these are coming back. 10% chance. I don't know. That's a pretty strong debuff. Oh, yeah, not too sure about that one. Imperial City, let's look at these. So these are basically new monster sets from the bosses there. Minotaur gives you armor, and then on dealing frost damage, is this a frost damage monster set? When you deal frost damage, you create an area under the target for 6 seconds that applies Chilling Bite. This deals frost damage and applies a stacking snare for 4 seconds. At 4 stacks, the enemy is immobilized and gains Major Brittle. Major Brittle. That causes the target to take 20% more increased critical damage. Is this the first use of that buff, Major Brittle? I don't know if that's been in the game. Minor Brittle is the one that we usually get from like frost damage, right? And the chilled status effect. Huh. Okay, very interesting. That's really interesting. I mean, it's a PvP set, but this has potential for PvE content, right? With this Major Brittle debuff. It is a fairly long cooldown, though, right? It's only up for 4 seconds with a 15-second cooldown. Okay, moving on. Lady Maligda, 1-piece offensive penetration. 2-piece when you deal direct damage to a target within 12 meters, create an area that after 1 second quickly moves forward and returns, deals shock damage, applying minor enervation for 5 seconds that causes the target to deal 10% less critical damage. Okay, so that's definitely a PvP set. And then Baron Thirsk, Stam recovery, Magicka recovery. That's kind of nice on a 1-piece set. 2-piece on dealing area direct damage. Mark a target for 6 seconds. Every 2 seconds after an explosive scamp is spawned nearby that detonates after 1 second, dealing magic damage up to 6 enemies. And applying minor timidity. Draining ultimate. Wow, that's pretty interesting. Drains 1 ultimate every 1.5 seconds. So it's kind of like the opposite of minor heroism. Each explosive scamp deals 100% increased damage. And this effect can occur once every 25 seconds. Wow, a lot going on with that set. Okay, let us know what you guys think of the PvP source sets in the comments section. Seems like some of these could apply to, PvE content as well. So definitely some interesting sets there. And last but not least, let's look at some of the existing item sets for the game that were actually changed in this PTS patch. These are kind of buried at the bottom of the patch notes. I didn't see these initially. Some of these are just bug fixes, but some of these completely change how these sets work. And so I want to talk about some heavy attack sets here. Noble Duelist, which I've used on a couple of builds, as well as Undaunted Infiltrator and Unweaver. These are really popular for like heavy attack sorcerer builds, heavy attack DK builds, stuff like that. So Noble Duelist first. This set now adds 2,681 weapon and spell damage to your light and heavy attacks, rather than adding 1811 damage. That's a flat damage number to these attacks. Similar thing happened here with Undaunted Infiltrator and Unweaver. They now add about 2,000 weapon and spell damage to your light and heavy attacks rather than adding 1685. So there has been some discussion about this. Is this a buff? Is this a nerf? It appears to be a bit of a nerf, especially at the top end. When you had these flat damage numbers, these would apply to every tick of your lightning staff, for example. So those 3 ticks of damage that happened before the big burst at the end, each of those was getting a flat damage boost by these sets. And that's how it currently is on the live server. Right now, with this weapon and spell damage added to your light and heavy attacks, I think it seems like the damage is going to be a little bit more spread out, so the ticks won't be quite as large. I've heard reports of players losing DPS on their heavy attack builds anywhere from like 15 to 30% on this, especially if you have a really well maximized build. Seems like you're going to lose some damage. Now, what's interesting is they didn't change any of the other heavy attack sets, only these 3. So I don't know if they're still testing this out. It seems like this would apply to other sets. There's a couple different ones in the game that are similar to this as well. So unfortunately, there's no developer comment here. It would be nice to see, what their thinking is behind this. I know recently in PvP, there's been sort of this trend of heavy attack PvP builds that can really nuke players. But don't worry yet. It is week 1 of the PTS. I will continue to look into this and test it out. And I will obviously be updating my heavy attack builds depending on what we get over the next couple weeks. Now, there is one other set that I wanted to show you guys. Speaking of heavy attack builds, Queen's Elegance. This is the Overland set. This set now grants Empower for 3 seconds after completing a fully charged heavy attack, rather than adding damage to your next direct damage attack. So this is another possible set that we could add for heavy attack builds with access to that Empower. That might be kind of nice. We've got some other fixed issues on sets like Dark Convergence, Hrothgar's Chill, Wrath of Imperium. But that is going to wrap up the set changes for week 1. If you guys have any thoughts, comments, suggestions, make sure to leave those down below in the comments section. And as always, if you like this video, if you found it informative, do us a favor, crush that like button. Make sure you're subscribed for more updates on the Elder Scrolls Online. And as always, thanks for watching. I will see you around in the next video.